Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks so much for joining us. My name is Desmond Martin, and I am the program coordinator for NextWaveSTEM. We're really excited to have you on the webinar today as we cover and think about ideas for promoting STEM in your school and organization. We know that sometimes it can be a challenge, even though that STEM acronym is not so new as it used to be. There are lots and lots of situations where we have to think to um, and even think about how we communicate to our community members, our students, our parents, even our administrators, and our community members, why it's important for our students, even our young students, to learn about STEM. So we want to really encourage you and build up some different ways for you to have that conversation and get everyone in your campus community excited about STEM. Before I go any further, I do want to take a little bit of time and cover some house rules, some housekeeping things. Uh, First is for all of our educators who are participating from Illinois. All of our Illinois professionals will have the opportunity to receive Illinois State Board of Education PD hours from today's webinar. Be on the lookout. There will be a follow-up email from today's webinar that has those CEU credit certifications available for you. Also, the chat is open. If you have any questions at any time, feel free to drop your question in the chat. I'm monitoring as we go, so I'll be able to see what you're typing in and be able to answer that question. In that same way, if I speed up when I get excited, I can speak a little bit quickly. If I speed up and I need to slow down or you need me to repeat something, just let me know. I can do that. But uh, just know that today's webinar is being recorded. All of our attendees will be getting a link to the YouTube video of today's recording. So if there's something that you missed and you want to go back and check out, you're able to do so. You will also get a copy of today's slide deck as well. Cynthia already has a really good question. So we are not on camera. No, you're not, Cynthia. You get to relax. You get to sip that tea. You get to drink from that aquafina. And if you need to get in contact with me, you got a burning question, feel free to drop your comment in the chat. The chat is always open for comments, critiques, and comedy. We are looking forward to everything everyone's going to be bringing. So we'll go ahead and we'll press forward and begin at the beginning. So for those of you who are not super familiar with the NextWave STEM, we are an education startup. Without focusing too much about what's on the slide at all, NextWave STEM is really focused on getting our students hands-on with technology at an early age. We believe that there is no such thing as having a student who is unable to really participate in meaningful ways with emerging technologies. And we think that's really important to have students be able to do that because we know that we're facing massive problems. We're facing massive problems even before the current global pandemic. Problems about climate change and food inequality, problems with regards to transportation, water safety, air pollution, some global problems, but some real life, everyday, localized problems. We really think that technology is an avenue to solve those problems. So we want to empower you as teachers, as administrators, as parents, whatever way that you engage in that ecosystem, we want to make sure that you have the resources that will allow you to help tackle those problems by training the next generation of engineers, of mathematicians, of scientists, of problem solvers. STEM is the tool, and we want to make sure that we can sharpen your skill set so that you can prepare our next generation. I will also pause. I almost forgot. My colleague, Segundi Chigani, who is from our school partnerships team at NextWaveSTEM, she is also in the chat as well. So if you've got any questions, she's going to be able to drop in some information and guide us in the right direction. Uh, thanks so much, Segundi. Uh, we're glad that you're here with us. So our goals for today, we've got quite a bit to cover, but we're going to get some great foundational information and hopefully set you up with the right kind of tools so that your students will be on the right path when it comes to STEM education, even if they can't be in your classrooms right now or maybe the foreseeable future. We want to first learn how to relate STEM fields to real world careers. We're not doing this just because it's cool. We're not doing it just because I'm excited about it. We want to see tangible STEM outcomes. And first we have to talk about, okay, what is STEM and how do we get from learning about this generally to what you could physically be doing as a student later on as a part of the workforce? Secondly, we want to talk about ways for you to engage your various stakeholders at your school. It's cool to know the subject matter, but now we have to make it real. How do we communicate that subject matter? How do we get people excited? And what can we do next? And then third, we get into the nitty gritty. You're going to need the resources. How do you choose what technologies to teach? How do you decide what's important with regards to hands-on equipment? If you've never taught emerging technology before, you're going to need a curricula to work from. You're going to need a rubric. That's something that we want to really empower you with at NextWave STEM, and we'll guide you through some really tangible paths that you can walk down. So why STEM? We are NextWave STEM. STEM is in our name, but we want to think to ourselves before we go any place further, why? Why do we care about STEM? Why should we care about STEM? Why should our students care about STEM? Is this just another acronym that our students are going to have to memorize and then recite back to us via rote? Or is this going to be something more tangible? Well, we know the acronym stands for science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. But even then, if I ask a parent what an engineer is, a lot of them will say someone who runs a train. While that is technically still true, there are some really easy ways to get to tangible definitions for what these acronyms are and what they encompass. Um, so basically, science is the way that students will understand the universe. Really short sentence with a really, really big meaning. And anytime your students are learning about science, they're building up those foundational skills to be able to observe and then make some good conjectures and understand how things work. When we teach our students about technology, we're actually teaching them the tools that they will build to apply power. And what I mean by power is the ability to make change happen. Um, there's amazing technologies that students use that they don't even realize that they're using. The simple lever is a very, very powerful piece of technology because it allows us to open and close a door. Before then, you had to use a really big piece of wood to make sure that your door didn't come flying open. And through some basic technology, I now have the power to open and close and keep a door locked. When we discovered and really harnessed the ability of internal combustion, we went from a country that got around mainly via train if we want to go large distances to being one that was able to drive on roads that would get manufactured, eventually to being able to fly not just through our own atmosphere, but through space. These tools that we build allow us to make some really dramatic change happen. And that's what technology is. It's the tool that allows the application of power, making something change. Engineering is my favorite. I'm biased. My professional background is in mechanical engineering. And engineers just aren't people who run trains. They apply the other disciplines, science, technology, and math, to solve problems with a purpose. Um, if I'm using technology, I don't want to use the technology for no reason. If I'm going to change something, I want to change something positively. I want to solve a problem. And as we're engineering, we're understanding who actually has the problem. Am I solving a problem for my neighbors? Am I solving a problem for myself? Am I solving a problem for the entire world? We also want to understand the scope of the problem. If the problem is an issue of not having clean drinking water, I need to consider where that water is coming from, where it's going to, why it's not clean, what's making it unclean, what are ways that I can purify it, how much will it cost, what needs to be built, who has access to that water, and then what systems, what processes or actual products will I build to make that change happen. Those are some basic examples, but I'm a huge fan because I tell our participants all the time, engineers are just professional problem solvers. And you as educators can relate to that every single day. You are also professional problem solvers. And the amazing thing about the last discipline in the acronym is math. Math is the science. It's actually a science, a physical science. It describes natural laws of the world with respect to quantity, structure, space, and change. In a lot of ways, that math and science become a little bit redundant because they're able to, your students are going to be able to physically observe, but also abstractly observe the way the universe fundamentally works. The fact that 1 + 1 = 2 is a fundamental law of the universe. And as we expand on that law, as we expand on our students' abilities to understand what's happening around them, we develop new technology and we're able to solve bigger and bigger problems. So I also want to pause here because we have this oftentimes interesting conversation when we think about STEM with regards to STEAM, adding an A to the acronym, thinking about the arts. And I love that STEAM acronym because what we acknowledge when we think about STEAM is the ability to take these other disciplines, science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, to actually create things that change the way that we feel and look upon ourselves as human beings. I am not even remotely qualified. I'm not too much of an artist myself, but I want to encourage our participants, for those of you who are really looking to engage with technology, with science, to build your students' art skills. The material, the content that we're going to be talking about today will really serve to empower your students in that endeavor. Oh, special shout out to Aisha, who is calling in from Saudi Arabia. Thanks. Huge time difference, so we really appreciate you being on the call with us today. So what's the big differentiator for NextWave STEM? It's emerging technologies. And it's emerging technologies in a way that are hands-on and that build students 21st century skills right now. And when we think about 21st century skills and getting hands-on with technology, what we're really supporting is your fundamental instructional and institutional needs and goals, regardless of whether you are teaching at the state level, thinking about Illinois, where we're based here in Chicago. Throughout the United States, the majority standards for science and engineering education come from NGSS. And we found that emerging technologies like 3D printing, computers and AI, drone technology, and even building robotics, even though that's something some of your students have a little bit more experience with, help build these foundational skills. Your students are going to become more powerful critical thinkers. They're going to move through challenges with creativity. They're going to have to collaborate, work with each other. We'll take a look at that in a little bit. And they're going to have to be able to communicate what they learn. Those 4C foundational skills when we think about 21st century skills. At the end of the day, we're using STEM as an avenue to prepare students for a changing job market. we could talk about how technology has enabled and changed job markets in some very, very fundamental ways as of late right now. The fact that we're having this conversation and could not have this conversation otherwise without the benefit of globalized technology speaks to some of the challenges that we're currently facing and some of the challenges that we can anticipate facing in a very, very near future. We want to encourage students to get ready for that right now. And building life skills while supporting next generation science standards really pushes our students in the right direction. So I mentioned a couple of emerging technologies. At NextWave STEM, we're offering some amazing distance learning courses. Traditionally in Illinois, what we have been able to do for the last 3 years is offer in-person instruction, both in school and after school, while licensing curricula in emerging technologies like 3D printing, robotics, and drones. And oftentimes people say, okay, that's really cool, that's great, but what does this stuff mean and how are my students going to use it? Well, let's talk about it. Right now, 3D printing in Fortune 500 companies is being used 55% of the time to do prototyping, 43% of the time to actually be a component of physical production of a part. And then if they're in the early phases, a proof of concept model, 2 out of 5 times, 41% of the time, a 3D printer is involved with that proof of concept. It is really, really critical when we think about the future of manufacturing, of building objects, of getting a physical object from a student's mind into being existing in actual real world, that they understand the ability to do computer aided design and 3D printing. And the applications are going to do nothing but continue to diversify. We're going to see those numbers go up. We've got pictures here on the far left. That's 3D printed metal. We're seeing 3D printed mechanical parts being utilized in the automotive industry and in the aerospace industries in much, much heavier applications. Not just talking about one-off specialty manufacturers, but we're seeing original equipment manufacturers use this technology. In the apparel and sports apparel space, we're seeing 3D printed technology being used in actual clothing, but in actual footwear technology. If you go to Adidas website right now, you will find them selling a shoe that uses a 3D printed midsole. And that's only going to increase in the future. So we see the customization that will be kind of at the forefront for what we see in manufacturing in the apparel space. And then at the far right, believe it or not, there are companies working on 3D printing biomatter, biomaterials. This is not the exact the exact process that they're using, but we're seeing 3D printed cellular tissue, both heart tissue and other blood tissues being produced right now. Not being tested and used, but in a lot of ways, when we think about 3D printing, the future, what we see in Star Trek, what we see in Star Wars is right here, right now. In that same vein, we see huge impacts of robotics right now. US Bureau of Labor Statistics says that for every 1,000 human beings in the workforce, there are 2 robots right now. But by 2025, in just 5 years, that number is going to go up more than double. And you can imagine kind of that line trailing like a hockey stick as we continue to move through time. A lot of us are receiving deliveries via Amazon, for example. Those robots at Amazon warehouses and factories are getting you your deliveries. That is the only way in which the system works. When people weren't quarantined and doing social distancing, the only way that 1 day and 2 day shipping works is that there's robots at multiple points that are getting your packages to you more efficiently. Supply chain is going to change dramatically. Construction is going to change dramatically. Integrated technology systems are going to change dramatically, and we already see them changing in dramatic ways right now. But the amazing thing about robotics is that in terms of emerging technologies, it's been emerging for quite some time. We first saw our industrial use of robotics at large scale when we think about automotive manufacturing, primarily here in Detroit in the 1950s and 1960s. That's my hometown. I'm Detroit born and raised, so I've got a chance to see robotics kind of nascently grow and expand in that space. And people have been studying robotics now for decades. Um, and what we learned in studying robotics and teaching robotics is that it's a great way to learn and a great way to prepare learners in the future. Um, they improve our students' interpersonal skills, their interpersonal skills. Um, they're building self-confidence. They're solving really complex physical and computer science problems. They're learning how to communicate and struggle through conflict. Um, Being a part of a team that's building a robot, whether it's FIRST Robotics or working with our smaller robotics in our distance learning programs, become really, really powerful ways for students to learn. And then when we think about drones, we have to shift the paradigm completely for our students oftentimes who think that drones are just toys. And there's, for over a decade now, been a huge gulf, a huge chasm in between what we think about drones as being useful for. Um, I was in high school the first time I heard that word drone being used with frequency and regularity. Um, it's interesting because when I first heard drone used over and over again, it was a military tool. People were dropping bombs and taking pictures. For a lot of us, that might be the first time we ever heard about drones being a part of the natural lexicon of our society. But they've grown into many, many more useful applications. We're seeing local news stations actually ground their helicopter fleets and replace them with drones for doing things like monitoring traffic and watching the weather, doing meteorology, highly localized meteorology. Um, Once again, multiple organizations, Amazon, UPS, they are either experimenting or currently doing drone air-based delivery. And we're seeing that parcel air-based delivery being done for remote locations, not so much here in the US, but on the African subcontinent. Many companies that are delivering essential goods via drone. And this buddy here we have up on our screen is actually a firefighting drone. If you think about the Paradise fires from a couple years back, um, something that we saw drones doing in that situation were actually having fire hoses attached to those drones so that they could fly into those situations, not exposing firefighters, but drones with infrared sensors flying into dangerous situations and locating people, search and rescue applications. Um, our drones are becoming much more diversified tools. In the future, we can even imagine drones being a part of construction and transportation solutions. We want our students to be on the ground floor. The future is always the goal. Um, these jobs in STEM, all of them are ranked in top 100 jobs in STEM careers by US News and World Report as of this year. You're going to need your students to be proficient in managing computer systems, developing web applications. We're going to need students to be proficient with technology and STEM because we need them to inform our policy. Um, it's still very, very difficult to know what is right and what is wrong and what we should decide about the application of technologies, especially when we think about drones and 3D printing without good information. Um, but STEM applies to careers outside of emerging technology. You're going to need advanced degrees in the sciences to become a school psychologist. You're going to need advanced degrees in the sciences to become a professionally trained mechanical engineer like myself. You're going to need advanced degrees in computer science to work in information security and also be able to inform these questions about security. These jobs, these high paying jobs are seeing at least 5% growth in the next 5 years. and are also consistently underserved and understaffed. Um, it's a low-hanging fruit. It's really good work, and we want to make sure that our students can jump in and be prepared to go, even at the middle school and high school level. And as a really on point, salient thing that we want to acknowledge for all of our educators who are on the line, we believe at NextWave STEM, teaching students about STEM will allow them to make an impact immediately. There are amazing stories of students engaging in citizen science where they don't necessarily have to go out and get those PhDs, but they work with those PhDs. They work with the actual scientists and feed in data and actually participate with the good science. About actually 4 years ago, in August, was the total solar eclipse that crossed the North American continent. There were tens of thousands of people taking pictures of that eclipse and feeding that in to citizen science initiatives so that we can learn more about our universe. We're doing things like tracking pollinator migration because we have to deal with what's going to happen to our pollinators. Some of us have heard the word murder hornet for the first time in our lives. That's a threat to pollinators, so we're going to have to track and know what's going on with them. And of course, we're tracking ocean plastic. What are these things that are really damaging to our ecosystems? Shout out to one of our NextWaveSTEM customers. Kathy is with us today. Hey, Kathy, thanks so much for joining us. But with respect to citizen science, it's not just science that students can do. Students are able to actually engage in problem solving. Students are working actively to build processes and solutions for lead contamination in homes. Some of us are very familiar with the Flint water crisis in Michigan with respect to lead service lines at homes, and there are literally millions of homes in urban areas and some suburban and rural areas throughout the United States that have the same problems that are just undiagnosed. There are students who had to deal with these repercussions actively working on trying to figure out the solutions. And there are students engaged with NextWave STEM right now. I'm super excited about this. Our distance learning course allows for students to actually design and implement protective equipment for COVID-19. Also, right from the headlines is people with 3D printing skills and 3D printing hardware participating in that effort. I anticipate that we're going to see even more of that in the future. So I've kind of evangelized a little bit here. Like I said, I get very excited. And the huge thing here is that what do we do with this excitement? How am I, as the professional, how are you as the educator who's excited, not just about the technology? You might not be excited about the technology. You may be excited about the prospect of your students really taking advantage of these opportunities. How do we get other people excited? Well, the answer to that is it's time to spread the word and get our stakeholders to the table. And there are a couple of different ways to do that. Right now, while we're socially distanced, a lot of you are working overdrive to stay in communication with your students. Many of you are teaching at distance via video calls, whether that be Zoom or Skype or Google Meet. However you're doing that, you're seeing your students and you're communicating both digitally, but with more traditional communication, say emails and letters home. Let them know about the STEM initiatives that you want to see in your school. Identify those problems that you want to solve. Talk about that technology that you want to use in your classroom. And from there, engage with them on social media. Facebook is a great tool, so is Twitter. LinkedIn is also an amazing tool. And you'll be surprised at the kind of things that pique your students' interest and pique your parents' interest too. And that whole angle of saying, okay, we want to make it as tangible for our students, not abstract. We're not doing the baking soda volcano because we live in Illinois, and the last time we checked, we didn't have volcanoes in Illinois. Let's learn about something that's in our backyard. Let's observe our wildlife. How many coyotes? And yes, we have coyotes in Chicago. How many coyotes are we going to be able to observe, and what kind of tools are we going to be able to use to help us observe coyotes? Something like that, that we can get the hook out and get the word out becomes really, really important as educators, engaging with our stakeholders. We love social media, and we want to connect with you on social media and talk about ways that we can bring the program to your school and get the word spread about what you're doing. But once we have the program in the school, we also want to engage and get hands-on. And there are a couple different formats that you can do that. Maybe talking about it isn't good enough. Well, let's actually do the thing. STEM nights. STEM nights are something that we've done in the Chicagoland area for a couple of years now through our partnership with Chicago Public Schools. That's a chance for students to come, parents to come after hours. It's not school, it's there to have fun. You get hands-on with robots. You get hands-on with a 3D printer and design software. You get hands-on actually flying a drone, maybe in your gym or in your hallway. You get that wow factor of how cool it actually is. And kind of in that same vein, we're a huge fan of STEM open houses. The open houses aren't just that opportunity for you as an educator to show off what's happening in your classroom with it's English or science or social studies, but a chance for the STEM program to show really the exciting things that are happening. In my mind, the STEM portion of the open house should be the most exciting thing. More exciting than the basketball team, more exciting than your band or your jazz orchestra. I want STEM to take the cake there. And then if you don't, if you're, well, not don't, but if you're interested in really giving your students a touch, getting them excited and really piquing their interest, a great way to that is to actually do intensives, these workshops. It could be 1 hour, it could be 90 minutes, it could be 3 hours spread out over time to get students hands-on with the technology. That's not so much focused around the curricula, but that's time to really explore areas that you might not have been able to in your curricula. You might be filling a hole, or you might want to make the learning tangible and real for your students. Those workshops are great opportunities to do that. And you can see here, there are some students who are actually coding a drone that's flying in the air in the classroom as a part of one of our intensive workshops. Really good ways to have those take homes about STEM and excite your STEM community, incite your school community with respect to STEM. So we've talked about the what, we talked a little bit about, okay, what are our options? How can we get people excited? Now we want to talk about our physical resources. What are the things, the tangible next steps that you can take as an educator to bring resources to your school using NextWaveSTEM and some other resources that you have available to you? Where can I go next? Well, for our school partners, we at NextWaveSTEM are trying to make this thing as easy for you in a challenging situation as we can. Right now, and I'll direct you to the link in a little bit, we're doing live online STEM classes with our certified instructors. These are people who are STEM professionals who work in 3D printing and work in robotics, who have been taught in our curricula and are able to guide your students as they're learning more about the curricula. Really, really exciting things that you can do in augmenting the learning that you're doing with your students at distance. But we're also really excited because we have 6 remote courses. We know that there's a difference with respect to what your students may have access to or what your school may have access to with respect to resources. You may be thinking to yourself, do I need a robot? Do I need a drone? Do I need a 3D printer? What about my students who don't have robots or drones or 3D printers at home? How could they participate with hands-on learning? We've got remote tools and we've got cloud-based tools. Um, Your students may not physically do 3D printing at home, but we can help them design, prepare for print, and get that print to them through a 3D printing service. Your students may not be able to build the robot at home, but we have a virtual robot simulation so that when they build the robot and they're coding the robot and they're executing instructions with that robot, when they do have access to the physical robot, those skills transfer directly over. Same thing with our drone. We may not be able to fly the drone outside of the house or inside of the house. Depending on how big your house is, that may or may not be a good idea. But we can simulate that flight baked right into the hardware, into the software, I should say. We'll be able to step into the next phase of learning for our students when they can get physically acquainted with the equipment. And we've got options for students who want to purchase that equipment. We can have that equipment shipped right to their door. And as a solution for our Illinois educators right now, our potential and current partners, professional development. Professional development is something that we do as a part of training you to execute the courses, but as a part of ongoing support so that we can open up your ability to continue to teach emerging technologies. Traditionally, we would do that in person at our Chicago location, but we're still doing that. You're participating with it right now. And if you're a school that's looking to license the curriculum and implement, we can set up distance online training for you as well, and professional and continual professional development for you. So it's going to be really, really exciting to see the next things that happen. I kind of mentioned that we have our distance and remote options that are available. Courses include coding and robotics, where they're actually learning how to build and code the robot. 3D printing and design. That's where our actual COVID-19 personal protection equipment project comes in, where students are learning how to design and print eventually, or if they've got a 3D printer immediately, something that's going to help their family and their community deal with the issue of COVID-19, and then coding with drones, where we're simulating and flying our drones in ways that allow students to solve problems. There is a link here in this button. I'm sending you all a copy of the slide deck. And when you click on the Learn More button, it's going to direct you to the NextWaveSTEM website where you can sign up to get more information and get the program started in your school. So for our educators who are interested in professional development, a lot of you signed up through this link on our website. Some of our educators on the line with us today came to us through a different actual stream. And that stream, I'm going to show you a little bit of how you would get to professional development for NextWaveSTEM. Throughout the entire summer, NextWaveSTEM is going to be doing our free professional development webinars. We are really excited because we've got a plethora of topics coming up that deal with how to teach STEM generally remotely, but also deals with teaching specific technologies remotely. Tuesdays and Thursdays are going to be our times where or our dates, I should say, and always at 2 o'clock. So date and time, Tuesday at 2, Thursdays at 2 for professional development. And for our Illinois participants, that's going to be 1 hour of ISB P credit for each of those sessions. We are really excited about it. We want to continue to support teachers, and if you're using the curricula, give you the resources to continue on. Just navigate to our website, nextwavestem.com/pages/professional development. Click on a professional development link to register, and it's going to take you directly to our Zoom registration. And so I actually think I got a question here. Oh yeah, STEAM, don't forget about the arts. Yes, we also want to encourage you to hang in there with NextWaveSTEM. We are developing resources to support our students, especially in the computer aided and design course. Right now, the focus is on PPE and COVID-19, we're always developing, and we're going to be developing those digital design skills that enhance your students' artistic abilities as well. Thank you so much, Kathy, for pointing that one out. And something we'd love for you to do is get in touch with us and connect with us at NextWaveSTEM. This is my face live and in color. On the slide deck is my face in black and white, and that's my email address. If you would like to get into the weeds of what we do at NextWaveSTEM, I'm the guy to email and ask. You can also find us on most social media platforms. We're on Twitter, we're on LinkedIn, we're on Instagram as well. And we are also really, really excited to connect with you there, to share information with you and to share some things we think are cool, and talk with you about things that you think are cool as well. My colleague Segundi also says, or yes, that's very true, that I am leading our webinar series. I'm really excited to be doing that with us next week. Segundi, once again, is our school partnerships manager. So if you want to get into the nitty gritty about putting together an order or exploring more details about learning targets, you can absolutely reach out to her. She's dropped in her email address, segundi@nextwavestem. So I actually want to pause right here. I'm going to back that slide up one slide. And this is our contact information, but I do want to open things out, or open things up and out for questions. If you've got a question about anything, or you just want to share something that's really cool, we would love to hear from you. Can my colleagues in Saudi Arabia and I get a certificate for this webinar, as our principal requires our PD hours, please? So Aisha, we will be sending you the form that confirms that you did attend the PD hour, the PD with us today. So you're gonna have confirmation that's here, that you were here with us. All you'll need to do is actually fill in your information on that form. That's for everybody. I'm so sorry, I'm not familiar with your state requirements with respect to PD, or what the actual form will need to look like. So reach out to me if you need something with more detail, or something a little bit different, or if there's a different form. We'll try to accommodate you the best that we can. Are there any other questions about anything? I'll pause for a little bit and not be so vocal. Oh, Sarah. Sarah says that she lives in Chicago, but she's a Michigander as well. Hey, Sarah. There are a lot of us Michiganders in the Midwest who took that little trip west. The weather is the same. Thanks so much for being with us. Any other questions? We want to pause and make sure that everyone has the opportunity. Well, if all hearts and minds are clear. Oh, no, we've got some questions. Oh, yes, Des, when is the next webinar and what is the topic? Awesome question, Sagani. Thanks so much. Our next webinar is next Tuesday, May 12th, from 12 to 3 p.m. How to teach STEM remotely. We're really going to be digging into a little bit more of the nuts and bolts, where we talk about an effective instructional model that actually includes a hands-on approach to STEM. What can your students do if they are unable to access what would traditionally be thought of as emerging technology equipment? What's going to be making a good substitute, and how can we build our lessons around what students might have available? But then we'll also talk about what are curricular options. Based on your setup, what are some different ways that you can actually approach teaching STEM with regards to hands-on learning? So we'll strategize and then we'll actually think about our tangible options next Tuesday. For those of you who have time, absolutely join us. Got a really good question from Sarah also about how literacy teachers can support STEM. Really, really good question. Um, One thing I would encourage, and this is because so many of our courses rely on this, is to actually think about what your students are doing when they code. Our robotics course and our drones course, students are going to be coding their robots and their drones. They're not flying manually, they're making these machines move autonomously. And in order to do that, they actually have to engage in some computer science. They've got to write code, and code is just a very short word to say instructions given to a machine. Now, the amazing thing about coding, about learning a code, whether it is HTML or JavaScript or it's Python, or in our case, Scratch, block-based coding, you may not have heard any of those words before, but just know that they're a language. And just like English or Spanish or Italian or Japanese, those languages have rules. And they're logically based. The rules aren't just out of nowhere. Studies have shown that our young students who are learning computer science and learning those languages are gaining those cognitive skills to build their literacy skills in the same way that traditional bilingual students are as well. So we're really working those same cognitive development, child psychological developmental processes when we're teaching our young kids how to code. We may think of integrating where our students are reading snippets of stories, but also coding snippets of activities for an avatar or a machine to follow. And we can support the actual language construction through each portion. So really excited about what that might mean. And we would love to hear more about ways that you might implement coding with your literacy, especially with your little ones. Aisha just asked a really good question. Any suggestions for our grade 2 students on how to present STEM activities, grade 2 via Zoom? Oh, yes, really, really cool question. I'm a huge fan of our young students learning how to use tools and thinking about 3D space and manipulatives. So what a current example of something that we've developed at NextWaveSTEM that I highly encourage you is thinking about 3D design. And we can scale that back a little bit in the way that we present that to our students. But with our tool, Tinkercad, it's free for all your students. If they have a device, if they have a laptop, if they have an iPad, they're able to log in and actually manipulate 3D objects. Pull, stretch, turn, cut, draw, group, and ungroup. They can model buildings, they can draw shapes, they can construct blocks very similar to what you might do in Lego, for example. And you as an instructor can actually guide them through how to use the tool. It's not just an effective tool for play, but it also builds special recognition. And as our students progress, we can now kind of turn our attention away from just using the tool for the sake of using the tool, for the purpose of the tool, which is to design something that we actually want to physically produce. We're building a 3D imagination space for physical objects. And we can do that as young as 2 years old. The amazing thing about Tinkercad is for many of our students, just signing them in and then letting them play with the tool for an hour gets them a long way to understanding how to actually use this tool to make the objects they want to make. So highly encourage that with your students. You can find more about Tinkercad at their website. I'm going to drop that in the chat, tinkercad.com. Really good question there, Aisha. And you had another good question. Are coders geared to 7 and 8-year-olds? as they are second language learners? Ooh, really good question. If I'm understanding it right, um, is there that same kind of mental cognitive learning that's being done for 7 and 8-year-olds as they're learning code, kind of thinking about what the data actually says? I would actually need to find the data and think about if those language skills around coding are kind of in the same line with a student who may be learning, say, Hebrew and Arabic at the same time. I could not say that off the top of my head. I would conjecture that they're a little bit different because the modality for expressing code is through print and through type. And then there is the question about, okay, how good of typists are my students actually as a 7 and 8-year-old? It's a little bit different. There are different skills in play there. But a really great question. There are plenty of actual researchers who are exploring that idea. I just don't have the data in front of me. So I'm going to do my good work and get that data. So we can speak to that. Do I encourage coder apps on iPad? Yes, yes I do. Really good apps for you to use, free resources like CodePen, code.io, code.org, free code camp has different localized resources throughout the world. And then for those of you who are using Khan Academy has some basic computer science and coding activities to teach students about JavaScript, for example, a coding language that makes things move. I'm a huge fan of allowing students to get at least a start when it comes to learning how to write computer code. Some of these are iPad apps. Almost all of those have access for you to use on a computer, whether that's a Chromebook or a Mac or a PC. If your students haven't done it, there's no reason why they can't at least try. Oh, so Gandhi also mentioned a really good tool for our younger students, thinking pre-K, kindergarten, or first grade. Osmo is also a really good starting point. We think about coding as a language, a way to give machines instructions. There's no rule that says that those instructions have to be written words. They could be arrows, they could be drawings. Words are just composed of letters and letters are just symbols. So we kind of take out the complexity and the abstraction there and allow our students to learn more about code at that younger age. Really, really good resource there. Thanks, Gandhi. Awesome questions. Are there any others? Oh, can Kahoot encourage STEM learners? Haha, I like Kahoot. Can Kahoot encourage STEM learners? Not natively. Kahoot is like a lot of tools in that it's as good as you make it. So if I would think of Kahoot as an addendum, something that I would include on with my young STEM learners in addition to what they're learning. So as an example, if I'm working with my class and we're building our robots, I might use Kahoot as a fun way to quiz students on whether or not they understand the parts of the robot and what they do. And that way they can be really encouraged and they can have fun with learning through their STEM concepts. But that actually does put a little bit of extra work on us as the educators to set the Kahoot up in such a way that it's fun. Oh, Christine, yes, Flipgrid. Flipgrid is really cool. They're able to pull in a bunch of different resources on Flipgrid and show off what they've learned. Definitely encourage Flipgrid for those of us who are familiar with Flipgrid, or even if you're not familiar with Flipgrid. Part of what we do in NextWaveSTEM is also encouraging our students to share their work with the community. Flipgrid is a great way to do that. Are there any other questions? We got some really good stuff. Nothing coming through. Oh, here we go. Please suggest what other things can young learners design and build in addition to robots? How can we motivate some of our female learners in STEM? Oh, that's a great question. That's a big one too. Ages 6 to 7. Okay, great. Okay, so I'm going to start with Narmeen's question about things that other young learners can do in addition to building robots. Um, so if your students don't want to build the robots anymore, if they've done what they want to do with Osmo or Lego robotics, we can think about STEM with regards to the science component as well. Something as simple as aeronautics, designing and flying paper airplanes, flying drones, launching rockets. We have the ability to teach some great lessons in gravity. Once again, aeronautics, the way that air interacts with objects, data collection, where we're thinking about how far something flies and why it flies. So we're integrating lots of different practices, mathematics and science into what we learn when we think about airplanes and drones. Airplanes and drones is our K-2 curricula that we license for our schools in the in-school traditional school setting. When we come back from our current pandemic situation, that's something that we would love to introduce you to and get you more information about as well. So definitely love paper airplanes and anything that has to do with flying for our younger students. Aisha asked a question. How do we motivate some of the female learners in STEM age 6 to 7? This is kind of an elephant in the room question. There is well documented evidence of young girls being discouraged from STEM fields at the kindergarten and first grade level, 6 and 7. And what we found in that research is that it deals with confidence and this idea of windows and mirrors as well. The primary reason why young girls do not see themselves as being good at or competent in math, it is primarily because of perceived confidence or lack of confidence from their instructors. Many of them themselves not feeling confident in their math skills. In the United States, for a lot of early elementary educators, the last math class that they had to take is an undergraduate algebra course. Many of them don't feel confident in the math themselves, and they kind of project that lack of confidence even onto their younger students. We also want to change that perception culturally, just overall. It is a very common thing to hear someone say, oh, I'm just not a math person. And we think that's totally fine. Whereas if they said, oh, I'm just not a reading person, we wouldn't think that's fine at all. We say, hey, that means you're illiterate. That's a problem. We've got to get that fixed. We want to really change that perception. And then on top of that, we want to show them that they belong in the field. We want to know that the InSight mission to Mars was led by 3 women. We want to show them women scientists and women engineers. We want them to see those people come into our schools and talk. We want to have those people talk to their students on our Zoom calls. We want to show them hands-on what it looks like, and that they're just as smart as their male counterparts, and oftentimes smarter than their male counterparts. We eliminate this idea that they don't belong in the space. Really good questions here as well. Segundi shared a great resource for those of us exploring things around aeronautics and flight, the Flight Museum and their STEM activities. Really good resource. Definitely check that out. So we are actually out of time. This was amazing. Thank you all so much for joining with us. And in addition to everything that we have shared, be on the lookout for our follow-up email. In that email, you will be receiving a copy of today's slide deck, which includes the link to our Learn More button so that you can learn more about our distance and remote learning offerings that we have available for you and your students right now. But you'll also be receiving a copy of the recording from today's webinar and the PD credit hour certificate. For our Illinois teachers, you can apply that to your PD hour requirements. And if there's any questions about the PD certificate or anything else, absolutely reach out and let me know, and we'll try to get those sorted out for you. But once again, thank you so much. And we will be looking to seeing everyone next week or the next time we see you. All right, everyone, have an awesome day.